I look like a hot mess right now. it is very hot today, but it is what it is, so I apologise if I look like shit, but it's too hot to put makeup on. Hey guys, welcome back to another video, and today we're going to be doing my February wrap up, and I read a lot of shit. I really did. I think I read 16 books in the month of February. That's a lot, so let's dive right into it. So the first book I read in the month of February was a reread for me, and that was The Long Call by Ann Cleeves. So if you've followed me for a little while, you know that Ann Cleeves is one of my favourite crime authors, and I wanted to reread this at the beginning because the TV show was just released here in Australia last month. I think they finished the final episode last week. Was it last week? Yeah, last week. So I wanted to reread this before the show came out. I have watched it before. I did manage to find somewhere I could watch it totally legally. No. Yeah, so the TV show only came out in Australia, and I did want to reread the book before the TV show came out because it'd been I think it'd been at least 2 years since I since I read this. So yeah, they definitely made some changes. I was quite interested to see what the changes were. I won't spoil it. I don't want to spoil it. But basically this follows a guy called Matthew Venn who comes back home after years of being away to his hometown, and his first murder is of a man with an albatross on his neck, and basically nobody knows anything about him, where he came from, and Matthew is also dealing with coming home many years after he was essentially thrown out of his religious group for being gay. So it was quite interesting to see what they changed and what they kept in. Is it a good adaptation? For the most part, yes. There were some things that I questioned why they changed. I can understand why they changed it though, so it's okay, but is it one of my favourite adaptations? At the moment, it's fine. I enjoyed it, but I really like to see them. I would like to see them do another season or even more series, because I feel like because Vera and Shetland, who are the other two books and TV shows that have been around for so long, that anyone who watches her shows knows those other characters. So it's very interesting having new characters and a new series introduced, and I think production-wise they could have made some changes that could have brought the story along a bit better. But for an adaptation, and it's by the same mob who produced Vera and Shetland, so I would like to see more series to see how they can improve on that. But other than that, I thought it was a good adaptation. I would, like I said, I would love to see more series done, just so that cast that they have can sort of branch out a bit more. But that was the first book I read in the month of February. Alright, so the second book I read in the month of February was an e-comic book, and that was Monstress Volume 1. So I'd seen this recommended on Katie Colson's channel, and I quite like the art style of this. So from what I remember, it's about a girl who essentially sells herself to this group of horrible people to find out, I think, what happened to her mother. I can't really remember. It was very early on in February, so, and with the other books I've read this month, I've kind of just pushed it to the side. I think I gave this 3.5 stars. I liked the story and the idea. Plot-wise, I think it was a little bit dense, but I would quite like to continue this series. Not straight away, but maybe later. But I did overall enjoy it. I think I binge read it in the afternoon, so that's a pretty good rating for, pretty good going for while I read it. But yeah, like I said, it was quite dense plot-wise, and there is a lot to work your head around, so maybe that's why I didn't enjoy it so much, because I do tend to like my graphic novels short and sweet, but we shall see. We shall see whether I pick up the sequel or not. Alrighty, so the next 5 are also graphic novels, and I'm going to get my reading journal for this because I do have a little bit of a spread. And that was Life is Strange Volumes 1 to 5. Is my camera going to... There we go. So, Life is Strange Volumes 1 to 5. So if anyone doesn't know what Life is Strange is, it's a game that was released back in 2013? I'm pretty sure it's 2013, I can't remember, but yes, so these are the sequels to the Life is Strange games. more of a sequel to the first game. So if you haven't played the first game, there will be major spoilers for what does happen in those games. So if you do want to play the game, I recommend doing that first and then going to read these. But these were all 5-star reads for me. I loved the continuation of the series, loved the characters. I'm not going to go into plot details because, as I said, it is a direct sequel to the game. So if you have not played that, I highly, highly recommend you do, because it is probably one of my all-time favourite games in recent years. So the next book I finished was probably the biggest book of the month, and that was Dragonfly in Amber by Diana Gabaldon. So this is book 2 in the Outlander series, and in Outlander book 1 we follow Claire Randall, who is a World War II combat nurse, and on second honeymoon with her husband, she is transported through this stone circle called Craignadoon in Scotland, and she meets another handsome warrior by the name of Jamie Fraser. And basically the first book is all about essentially her divided between her growing feelings for Jamie and her commitment to going back home to her husband Frank. So book 2 continues where Outlander book 1 finishes off. I'm not going to spoil what happens in that book if anyone wants to read Outlander. So I've been quite a big fan of the TV show for a long time, and they are really good adaptations. I think I said this when we read the first book last month. So me and a couple of other booktubers, bookstagrammers, are reading the series throughout the year. So last month, back in January, we started with Outlander, and we're working our way through each book a month until we get to book 9, which was the most recent release. So, and I said this before in the group chat we had for that, and it's really a really good adaptation, because I felt like, because I watched the first season back so many times, I didn't really need to read the first book, because it's quite a very good adaptation of the source material. Like, I basically felt like I was reading about the TV show, and that's a really good sign. Book 2, there were some tweaks to it that weren't, obviously, with the TV show adaptation, you've got to chop and change stuff, like with the long call previously mentioned. But I overall still quite enjoyed Outlander. Not Diana. Who's the... Davina Porter. That's the name of the lady who narrates it. Davina Porter. I reckon she does a fantastic job of doing the different voices, and she keeps it interesting. If I read this physically, I probably would have DNF'd it, only because like I said before, it feels like a really good adaptation from page to screen. So, like I said with the first book, I felt like I was reading about the TV show, and I could still picture the first season in my head on the page. So, but I did give this 3.5 stars like I did the first book. Yes, so we are continuing in the month of March with Voyager, which is book 3. So, as obviously, because we do get season 6, I think it's next week. Is it the 6th of March? I know it's sometime next week that we get season 6, but I haven't watched the rest of season 4 or season 5 yet. I've been really behind. I've just not been in the mood to sort of sit down and binge watch it. But yes, so it'll be interesting to see as the books progress how much they've had to leave out, because I think series 6 is only... How many episodes is it? Is it 6 or 8? I think it might be 8. Whereas all previous seasons have been 12 episodes. So, yes, I know quite a few people were surprised that the series is a lot shorter than the previous, because previous seasons we've had 12 episodes a season. This one I think we only have 8 max. So, but yes, it'll be quite interesting to see what happens there. Okay, so the next one I want to talk about is one that I read for Polathon. So this was a readathon hosted by Jade from JUA Reads, and that was Orphans of the Storm by Celia Imrie. I think I read this for... What prompt was it that I read it for? So I doubled up on prompts for this. So it was Cold Word and Adventure. So this is a story based around a young mother who essentially marries a guy that... She essentially she thinks he'll help her get away from, because she basically thinks her life is shit, but turns out he's not so nice either. So this centers around her and her attempts to get away from her husband and take the kids as well. And this is a journey that eventually ends up on the Titanic. So I rated this, what did I rate it? So I rated this 4.5 out of 5 stars. And this is the first book by Celia Imrie that I've actually read. I didn't even know she was an author. I knew she was an actress, but I didn't even know she wrote books. So, and this is the first book of hers I've read. So I really quite enjoyed it. I would have liked more, I would have liked the plot to center more around the Titanic a bit more, because it doesn't really happen until maybe the last half of the book. You don't really get to see. To me, the Titanic part felt a bit rushed. It definitely could have, I reckon it could have been a bit more interesting if the whole sort of, how do I say this, sort of setting and, you know, the retelling of prior events sort of, maybe even if they took place while the boat was sinking, or, you know, you'd have these flashbacks or whatever. I think that might have, for me, that for a book that, you know, essentially, look, it has the Titanic on the cover. Look, there. It has the Titanic on the cover. I think that could have been more, the story could have took place on the boat a bit more than what it did. But overall, I quite enjoyed this. Like I said, I gave it 4.5 out of 5 stars. I'm really looking forward to picking up more serious books, because I didn't even know she was an author. I just, that woman is a girl of many talents. Next book I read in the month of February was also for Peloton, and that was Midnight in Everwood by Emze Kunzia? I think I've said that right. Yeah, so this was a recommendation by Gav from How to Train Your Gavin. I really enjoyed this. So this is a Nutcracker retelling, and in this one we follow a girl called, is it Marietta? So Marietta is a ballet dancer who wants to basically go and do ballet instead of get married. But of course the family has other ideas. So one day she encounters this guy called, is it Dr. Drosselmeyer? Yes. So one day she encounters this guy called Dr. Drosselmeyer, who one day transports her to the world of Everwood, and it was so good, you guys. I think I gave this 4.5. Yes. So I gave this 4.5 out of 5 stars. I highly recommend this if you like retellings. This is probably the first Nutcracker retelling I've ever read, and I really enjoyed it. Yeah, so thanks so much to Gavin for this recommendation. Basically, he described it as the Night Circus, but with a plot. So I am halfway through reading Midnight in Everwood. I am halfway reading the Night Circus again for Mel's Roll of Reads. I cannot think today. I need more coffee, obviously. Yes, so I am rereading, attempting to reread The Night Circus, but I'm listening to the audio book because that was a book I DNF'd last year because, oh my god, it was so boring. But I am listening to the audio book. The audio book does make it a little bit more interesting because it's narrated by Jim Dale. He's a fantastic narrator. If you haven't listened to any books narrated by him, I highly recommend you do. Basically, he's the only reason I'm still listening to the audiobook, because last year I got about 50% into the Night Circus and DNF'd it, so hopefully listening to the audiobook might help me with that. But if you weren't a fan of the Night Circus, this I recommend a hell of a lot more, because like Gavin basically said, it's the Night Circus but with a plot, and it's a great read, so highly recommend that one. Alrighty guys, so the next book I read in the month of February was a library book, which I have since returned, and this was on my 12 recommendations for 2022, and that was The Simple World by K.A. Tucker. So I'm going to be honest with you guys, this was not a book I would normally gravitate towards because it is a romance book. So normal, unless it's fantasy romance, I don't really tend to read like normal romance. So I was quite nervous going into this because, like I said, I do not read this kind of book at all, but I'm very, very glad it was recommended to me, because holy shit, I could not put this book down. Okay, so the first maybe 100 pages are a bit slow, but once you get through that, the rest of it picks up. So in this one we follow a young girl called Kella, who is essentially been living with her mum for most of her life since her parents separated, and one day she gets an invitation from her dad to go back and basically reconnect with him, because unfortunately he is dying. So this gave me very Last Song vibes. If you've seen or read that book, you'll know what I'm talking about. But oh my god, this just gave me such Long Song vibes. I absolutely loved it. Love the setting of Alaska. And can I have a Jonah, please? Like, okay, he is an asshole in the beginning. Like, to be fair, I was for Cal. I wanted to kick his ass, like, seriously. But oh, it just grew on you, and I'm just so devastated my library does not have a second book. Why is it when I start a new series, my library does not have the whole series? Like, just, why do this to me? But this was such a great read. I rated it 4.5 out of 5 stars, and I'm very, very keen to pick up the sequel. So hopefully my library does get it in, because I am trying to rein in my book buying this year. So I'm doing quite a good job of it so far, I will admit. But yes, definitely highly recommend this if you're into romance. And thank you so much to Casey from Do the Pages on Instagram for recommending this to me, because like I said, I would never have picked up a book like that. So yes, thank you so much, Casey, for recommending this to me. So before we move on to the last few books I read, I do want to talk about the one book I did DNF this month. And I know people are going to be like, what? You did not like this book? And I'm being like, no, I'm so sorry. But unfortunately, that was Under the Whispering Door by TJ Klune. I really did want to like this book. I really did. Like, the premise was so interesting, but it was just so slow. I think I got to the 150 page mark, and I'm like, okay, is anything going to be happening here? Because I need the pace to pick up. Like, I understand it's a character-driven novel, but just, can we please have some plot going? Because I am bored here. I am going to go into a reading slump if I keep reading this. So, unfortunately, I did have to DNF it, but I may return to it in the future, but I highly doubt it, because the beginning was a really good premise. So, excuse me, I need this one. So, in this one, we follow Walter, who is this big boss of a CEO company, and he's basically a big asshole, but one day he essentially kicks a bucket and is visited by this ghost at his funeral, and is basically taken to this magical house to essentially learn to move on. Yes, I'm very, very sorry to the people who do love this book, but it's sadly a no from me. I was just so bored. I'm sorry. Okay, so moving on from Under the Whispering Door, which again, was so disappointing, I'm sorry. But we move on to probably one of the first, it's probably the first 5-star read I had. No, it wasn't, sorry. Life is Strange was the first 5-star read of the month. But it was the next 5-star read of the month, and that was Dark Waters by Catherine Arden. So this is book 3 in her Small Spaces series, and we do get book 4 coming out. I think is it September it comes out, or October? I think it's October, because I've seen the cover for the book 4, and it's if you don't like clowns, don't look at it. Just don't. I'm doing you a favour. Just don't. If you don't like clowns, no. So in the first book of Small Spaces, we follow a young girl called Ollie who has lost her mother in a tragic accident, and one day on a field trip, she encounters a lot of supernatural events and forms a bond with two best friends, Coco and what the hell's his name? What the hell's the other kid's name? Brian, that's his name. I cannot remember names today, I'm so sorry. Yes, so Coco and Brian are her two best friends, and I love these books. If you've loved Catherine Arden's other books, you'll love these. They're so easy to get through. I basically binge read Dark Waters in an afternoon. It's nice quick read, you get through it, and 5 stars. So I am definitely going to one day purchase all the 4 books once they are released, hopefully in hardcover, because I do love the hardcovers of them. But yes, I cannot wait for book 5, because the way the third book ended on a cliffhanger, I'm like, seriously? Thank Christ book 4 comes out this year. I have to do a binge reread of the whole series. I will. Okay guys, so the next book I read is my next 5-star read, and if you have seen my vlog on this, you will know that it was probably it's in the running to probably be one of my favourite reads of 2022. But that was House of Sky and Breath by Sarah J Maas. Now this is book 2 in the Crescent City series, and in Crescent City we follow a half-human, half-fae girl called Bryce Quinlan, who is essentially called in one day to help with this series of murders who previously they thought was solved with the arrest of a suspect in that case. But unfortunately 2 years later, after this guy's released, the murders kick up again, and she's essentially called in to help the investigation after this guy essentially was involved with some people close to her. So yes, this was probably, I'm still reeling from the ending of this book. I absolutely love this book. I enjoyed this a lot more than book 1. I've probably mentioned this before, but book 1 I found took a long time to get into, maybe because it was a new series and there are so many characters in this, and this book's no exception. Like this boy's 800 pages long, so it's just about the same length as Crescent City 1. But yes, I really enjoyed this, and I'm still blown away by that ending. This has just made me fall in love with Sarah J Maas's writing all over again, and just makes me want to go and back and reread her other books. So yes, this at the moment is in the running for this is probably my favourite read of 2022 at the moment. As I said in my vlog for this, The Blood Trader by Lynette Noni does come out later this year, and that may be in the running as well. But we shall see. It would be hard to top this one at the moment, but yes, I love it so much. I love it. Alrighty, so the next book I read was a part of my Shelf Destruct series, and that was Kingsbane by Claire Legrand. So this is book 2 in the Imperium trilogy. So in book 1, which is Furyborn, we follow 2 timelines, Riel and Eliana. So essentially what the plot of this series is that there is a prophecy essentially predicting, I can't speak today, it's horrendous, 2 queens, one to destroy the world, one to save it. I'll leave you to try and guess which one of these 2 time girls it is. But yeah, so basically this is a dual point of view where we follow Riel and Eliana. One is set 1,000 years before, and one is set in the present. So this book, I kind of struggled a little bit to get into it. So it probably wasn't until maybe the 150 page mark that the pace of this picked up. I'm so glad it did, because I kind of put this aside because I had started reading this before House of Sky and Breath came out. So I kind of put this on the back burner while I read House of Sky and Breath. But after that I went back into this, and it was a bit hard to get back into. But as I said, once the pace picked up again, it was just so good. And so I rated this 3.5 out of 5 stars. Like I said, the first 150 pages were a bit hard to get into because essentially we do slow down a bit from the fast-paced ending of book 1. So it essentially tried to ease us into the plot a bit more. But not that that's a bad thing. I just felt like we could have got there a bit quicker. But I'm very keen to pick up book 3. I was planning to read book 3 in the month of February, but sadly I didn't get to it. Hopefully once I finish my TBR for Roll of Reads, I can get back to Lightbringer, which is book 3, because the way this ended, holy fucking shit, I am so glad I've got book 3, because I'm like, what? Yes, so I did give this 3.5 out of 5 stars. It wasn't bad, but it wasn't fantastic either. So yes, I do still recommend this trilogy. I did reread book 1 back in January because it's been a while since I read it, and I couldn't really remember what had happened. So yeah, I did quite enjoy this for what it was, and I'm very keen to pick up book 3. Alrighty guys, so the next book I want to talk about is one that I hope to enjoy a lot more than I did. Fortunately, that wasn't the case, but that was The Christie Affair by Nina de Gramont. So in this one we follow a young girl called, what was her name? So in this one we follow a girl called Nano D, who is essentially a girl who becomes the mistress of Agatha Christie's husband, and this takes place over the week, was it a week that she disappeared? I don't know too much about it. I think it is a thing that happened in real life. I'm not too sure. I'll have to look that up later. But yeah, so this essentially follows her mistress and essentially why she tries to get with Agatha's husband and her motivations behind it. So the thing that annoyed me the most about this book was the jumps between different characters' point of views. So one minute you'd be following the mistress, then her husband, then the police officer investigating the disappearance, and then you go to Nan's flashbacks. And for me, it just made the plot feel very disjointed and a little bit confusing. So I sort of had to go back and, okay, who are you again? Where are we now? It was like that. So I could only rate this 3.5 out of 5 stars. Yes, I really wanted to enjoy this book a lot more than I did, but sadly it just didn't quite hit the mark for me. If looking back, I'd probably bump it back to a 3-star. I didn't hate it, but I didn't love it either. So it did pick up about halfway through, but would I read this again? Probably not. But yeah, unfortunately this was a little bit of a disappointment for me. Okay guys, and the final book I read just yesterday was another library book that I returned, and that was Daughter of the Moon Goddess by Sue Lin Tan. So this is a book that's inspired by the Chinese legend of the Moon Goddess. So in this one we follow the daughter of the Moon Goddess, who has essentially been sent to this remote area and sentenced to stay there. So she can't leave, she can't basically do anything, and one day her daughter's magic is discovered and she is sent away to protect her. So this follows the daughter's quest to essentially redeem her mother and get her family back. So this one I quite enjoyed. The only pet peeve, there's a couple of little things I had with it. The first one is I think this probably would have worked as a standalone. So I do know that the second and final book is coming out later this year. I felt like this didn't need to be a duology. I felt like she could have, she could have essentially wrapped this story up in one book, and I would have been fine with that. But I am still quite keen to see where book 2 goes and how she kind of ties everything together. And the second thing was that the pacing did slack off a bit in the second half. So maybe like the middle of the book I felt could have not necessarily cut out, but certain aspects could have been reduced a bit more, cut out a bit more, if you know what I mean. So this for me it didn't make me hate it, but it just made me sort of feel like it could have been shortened a little bit, and it doesn't, for me, it probably would have been fine as a standalone. I kind of can't necessarily see the point of a second book, but like I say, I am quite keen to see what she does for the second book. So yes, I rated this 3.5 out of 5 stars. It was an overall enjoyable read. I would recommend it to people, but yeah, just those two aspects, I probably think that she could have trimmed down the length a little bit more and condensed it into one book, because yeah, I'm still quite keen to see what she does with the second book, but I still feel like this could have been just done as a standalone. It would have worked fine. I reckon it would. Alright, so that is the 16 books. That's a lot. I did not expect to read this many. So yes, that is the 16 books I read in the month of February. So that is where we'll leave it for today. If you liked this video, please give it the big old thumbs up. If you have not subscribed to my channel already, please, I highly recommend doing so. And I shall see you guys in the next video. Bye!